What's going on, everybody? Barrett here with Specca Tech. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the absolutely beastly JTR Captivator 2400 subwoofers. I did release the first impression video of this subwoofer not too long ago. I'll link that in the top right hand corner, but today's going to be the review. So we're going to talk about the measurements. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the performance and the sound quality. It's going to be a great video, so make sure you guys stick around. We are going to get right into the review today of this beastly subwoofer, but I just want to point out that I did receive the delivery of my Arendelle, or Arendelle, I'm not sure how you pronounce it because everybody kind of says it differently, but I got 5 towers of the 1723s, as well as 2 surrounds of the 1723Ss in gloss black. I'm super excited to get these unboxed and share with you guys what they're all about. Build quality is top notch, and I know the sound quality is up there as well because I've heard them at a friend's place. I don't want to say too much until I've heard them in my room, but I was really impressed with them when I heard them in the past. So if you want to see more about these speakers, make sure you stay tuned on the channel. And if you haven't, make sure you subscribe and tick the bell icon if you do. And one thing I want to clear up before we get any further with this video is that I bought these subwoofers with my own money. So nobody has any influence, nobody has any say, nobody has any power whatsoever over this video. I don't have to show this video to anybody and have it approved before I upload it to YouTube. It's my thoughts, my opinions only. All right, so let's talk JTR. For those of you that aren't aware of JTR as a company, they're one of the companies that's kind of at the top of the list when it comes to home theater subwoofers. They just are hard to beat. They're hard to compete with even, given the price of their subwoofers and the performance that they provide. It's just kind of out of this world. This is the second set of JTR subwoofers that I've had. I had their RS2s before, which is a dual 18-inch sealed version of their Captivator, and it was fantastic. I wanted to try their ported version, so this Captivator 2400 is ported with an 18-inch driver that is very high excursion with a ton of power, and it is impressive. So if you're out there and you're looking for a subwoofer that's just going to blow your mind, you're really looking for something that, you know, it's just kind of above the rest in so many ways, I definitely think you should take a look at JTR, and that's what we're going to talk about today with these subwoofers. They're just kind of head and shoulders above most subwoofers out there, and we're going to talk about why that is, how that is, so make sure that you stick around for this video. The first thing I want to talk about with this subwoofer is the aesthetics and the build quality. So when it comes to the build quality and the aesthetics, it's kind of a bittersweet thing with JTR. I'm probably not alone on this, and I'm not saying anything bad about JTR here, guys. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's just a little bit bittersweet. They are built incredibly well. They're built from void-free Baltic birch. They're incredibly solid. I think these are about 146 pounds each, so you'll feel that they're incredibly solid when you try to move one into your place. So it's not the build quality that I'm saying is bittersweet. They are built top-notch. The amplifier is durable. It's reliable. I haven't had any complaints about my amplifiers specifically, but also I haven't read online that anybody's been having any issues with their amplifier. So they're very reliable. The driver is incredibly robust. This driver is probably one of the beastliest drivers you will ever see. It's 18 inches. It's got a crazy excursion, and it's just solid all around, and it will shake your, not just your house, but probably your neighbor's house too. So the one part that I'm talking about that's kind of bitter in the bittersweet aspect of this, because the sweet part is the build quality is fantastic, is just the aesthetics. They don't look bad, don't get me wrong. They are just a very industrial, utilitarian kind of look to them. It has like a Duratec style paint. It's like a textured black paint, which makes them very durable. And in most cases, this is going to suit people's home theaters. But in my kind of media / home theater room here, they are visible, so they are open. So I don't want this to come off wrong. Like I said, it's not really bitter, but it is kind of bittersweet in a sense that they are utilitarian. They're very industrial. There's not much flair or wow factor in the way that they look is, I guess, what I'm getting at. You can have other finishes with JTR. You can have custom finishes, gloss paint, or even veneers if you want to suit your decor. That can be done with JTR, but it will be an extra cost. But all in all, looking at the build quality and the aesthetics of these subwoofers, there's absolutely nothing wrong that I can point out. The one thing that I would like to see, though, with the Captivator 2400 specifically, is the amplifier is at the kind of at the top of the back of the subwoofer, and it's in a horizontal orientation. I would actually prefer this to be lower down and vertical. I'm sure there's reasons why they did it this way, and it's a bit of a nitpick, just so that I didn't have to run the cables to the top of the subwoofer versus just plugging it in at the bottom. But in some cases, it's a little bit more convenient because you can easily see the amplifier if the back of the amplifier is facing a wall. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of the subwoofer, and that's of course going to be their performance and their sound quality. Where JTR subwoofers really shine, and specifically the Captivator 2400s really shine, is in the performance and the sound quality department. Now, in my room, I have experienced many different subwoofers before. I've experienced subwoofers from about $10,000 US and below. That's not me bragging. I'm just saying I have had a lot of experience with subwoofers, and I have to say that my personal favorites are the JTR subwoofers, and we're going to get into why that is coming up. Now, the first thing that really sets JTR subwoofers apart from the rest of the crowd is performance. They are known to provide you with just phenomenal performance for their price tag. I know that a price tag of $3,500 US isn't exactly low, but when you're dealing with what type of performance that these are giving you, it is not bad at all. It's actually a great value. And when talking about value, I had mentioned in my first impression video of these subwoofers that I think that these are kind of the sweet spot of the JTR subwoofers. And I had some people comment that, well, really the Captivator 4000 is the sweet spot for the JTR subwoofers, which is basically the dual 18-inch version of the CAP 2400. It's ported. It's got two 18-inch drivers and I believe 4,000 watts RMS. You can check the specs online, but and I wanted to kind of clarify what I meant by these being the best value. Now, when it comes to sheer numbers, which we're going to get to in a bit, I did take some room measurements in my room of these subwoofers, and they performed phenomenally. But when it comes to sheer numbers, no, the Captivator 2400 is not at the same level as the CAP 4000, simply because it has double the cone area and has double the power. So, of course, the CAP 4000 is going to have more output. But what I meant about the CAP 2400 being the best value, in my opinion, or the sweet spot, so to speak, is the fact that you are still getting a ton of performance. I believe at 10 hertz, you can look up the CEA 2010 numbers on database.com. Great website if you want to compare the CEA 2010 numbers, which kind of gives you a good general idea of a subwoofer's output. But anyway, at 10 hertz, I believe these are somewhere around 101 or 101.5 decibels at 10 hertz. And the Captivator 4000, I believe at 10 hertz is about 108 decibels. Now, of course, that is about 7 decibels or 6.5 decibels, whatever it might be, more than the Captivator 2400. So even though the CAP 4000 is $5,000, it is still giving you basically that extra 6 to 7 dB in most of the frequency range over the CAP 2400. So you are getting more for that extra $1,500 US. So I'm not arguing the fact that the Captivator 4000 is the best value overall out of all the JTR subwoofers. It certainly is. It gives you the most performance for an extra $1,500 over the CAP 2400. In my opinion, though, is it really needed? If you're going to be doing 2 or 3 subwoofers anyway, do you really need the CAP 4000? If you want the most extreme bass, absolutely. Go with the CAP. Oops, I'm knocking things over here. But yeah, if you want the most extreme output and extreme bass, go with the CAP 4000. No question, that is going to shake any room of pretty much any size, and especially if you're going to do more than one of them. But with that absolutely crazy performance of the CAP 4000 comes a pretty crazy size too. No, it isn't that wide, but it is substantially deeper than the CAP 2400, as well as taller to accommodate the two 18-inch drivers. So if you do have the room for it, by all means, you can get the CAP 4000 and get better performance. But for me, in my space, the reason this is the sweet spot is because the size is still manageable. It still has a ton of output. And yes, it is less money than the CAP 4000 still. So if you're looking at 2, you'd be looking at about $10,000 US plus tax and whatever shipping for the CAP 4000 and $7,000 for 2 of the CAP 2400s, and still have absolutely phenomenal performance with a subwoofer that is a little bit more manageable size-wise. So that's kind of where I was coming from when it came to saying the CAP 2400 is kind of the sweet spot when it comes to size, price, performance. Just wrapped up in a complete package, I say it's the sweet spot. And that's just my opinion. I'm sure there's others out there that have different opinions, but I do think that these are the sweet spot. So we're going to get to the room measurements in just a bit here, but I kind of want to just give my impressions of the performance of this subwoofer. Now, like I said before, I did have the RS2s, which is a sealed version with dual 18-inch drivers and 4,000 watts peak. And then I have now the single 18-inch CAP 2400 with 2400 watts, but it's ported. So when you're dealing with a ported subwoofer, typically you are going to get better performance, or at least more output when it comes to the counterpart being sealed. I did feel that the CAP 2400s has a little bit sharper, a little bit harder punch to it. Again, I was basing that off of memory, but I did feel like maybe the efficiency of the ported design does give it a little bit more of a sharper, harder punch. But not a huge difference, but I did feel like there was a difference there. And the other difference I noticed is that the RS2s I felt had a little bit more weight to them. They had a little bit more of a heft or a thicker bass. I'm assuming because they have a dual 18-inch driver and more power, but I did feel like there was a little bit of a difference there. Not that these CAP2400s are lacking at all in the heft department. These things shake the ever-living crap out of my entire house. There's no lack of weight or heft here, but I just felt like the dual 18-inch RS2s did have a little bit more. Now, just for fun in the performance section, let's do some demos just to show you guys this driver in action. It's absolutely insane. It shakes my fireplace like crazy, so you will hear some rattling there. But I also want to give a disclaimer that my recording equipment, my room, the device that you're listening on, and the fact that YouTube compresses the audio doesn't mean that this is an accurate depiction of what I was hearing in my room, so make sure that you guys keep that in mind for these demos. Make sure to check your volume because there is some heavy bass inbound. I hope you guys enjoyed those demos. I know that I always do. I know that they don't prove a whole lot, but subwoofer demos are always fun. All right, before we continue with performance and sound quality, let's have a look at the REW Measurements, which is the measurements of this subwoofer in my room using a software called Room EQ Wizard and their calibrated microphone. It just gives you an idea of the performance. Generally speaking, of course, every room is going to be different, so don't take my measurements as what you would expect to see in your room, but it does give you a general idea. All right, so here we are on my computer screen, and I am showing you Room EQ Wizard. So I've already done these measurements, and this is what's called compression testing. For those of you that aren't aware, basically you take a measurement of your subwoofer, increase the volume a set amount. So in my case, each time I did a new measurement was 3 dB, and you keep going up in 3 dB until you experience what is called compression. So in this case, this blue line at the top here, we were experiencing some compression. As you can see in these other lines, they're very linear. There's an equal space between them. And then when we get to this blue line, especially when you get down to these lower hertz, 11 hertz, it is compressing a little bit. I'd say at least about a dB or maybe a little more. And then you're getting a little bit of compression here as well. So we'll call this line, this blue line up here, as our compression. So we won't use that as our max line. We'll take that line away. So our max line is going to be this green line here. So for instance, at about 32 hertz, we're at about 108 decibels. Here at 11 hertz, we're still at about 108 or 109 decibels. So as you can see, absolutely stellar performance here. And I want to point out that these measurements are taken with the room size set to large. So on the LF adjust, I have it turned all the way up to boost the low end. So that's why you're kind of seeing this gradual roll off here. It's kind of like a house curve if you increase the LF adjust. And I'm going to show you guys what it looks like with the room size set to small, and then with the room size set to in the middle as well, between small and large. But as you can see, a ton of output, and this is just a single JTR Captivator 2400 in the right-hand corner of my room. So you're looking at peaks of about 109 or 110 decibels. And again, that is removing this line of compression. If you go to this line, obviously you can get more output, but you're starting to compress. So it is capable of a little bit more, but that's with compression. All right, so let's get rid of these. And let's go to compression testing with the room size set to small. So as you can see, as I start clicking on these, that the low end is rolled off more than with the LF adjust set to a large room, but you are getting higher peaks because it is a flatter response other than this roll off here. I'd say it starts to roll off somewhere around 14 hertz here, 14.5 hertz. You're rolling off a little bit more. It's not quite as flat, but it's still very usable output down to 10 hertz. So let's not cross that off. But we didn't really experience any compression with the room size set to small. And I was getting to some pretty extreme volumes here, like -2 on this would have been on my AVM 90. So -2 on the AVM 90 is not 2 decibels off from reference. For some reason, when it comes to Anthem room correction and the Anthem processors, they're using the reference scale of volume, but it's much, much louder. So -2 on this is not like -2 on the reference scale. This would be in the pluses in most processors. I would say that reference on the 0 dB or reference volume on an Anthem, or at least my Anthem with ARC, would probably have been somewhere around 10, 12, -10 or -12 dB. So we're beyond reference volume here. We're louder than reference volume. And I want to point out that I did not have Anthem room correction turned on for any of these measurements. I had completely removed the ARC file from my processor. So this is no ARC. This is just the subwoofer alone. And of course, these nulls, for those of you that don't know, this is my room. Don't take this as a fault to the subwoofer. It is the room, including this peak. That's my room. It always seems to have this peak. So anyway, let's look at our maxes here. So at about 32 hertz, we're at 116.5 decibels. So we do have a much higher peak there. And then down at about 11 hertz, we're still at 104 dB. I believe it was 108 or 109 dB with the LF adjust set to large. So you are getting about a 5 dB or 4.5 dB boost there, but you're sacrificing peak output in the higher octaves. So this isn't my preference when it comes to settings, but I just wanted to show you guys that if you want to set the room size to small, this is what you're looking at, and you will get higher peaks. I couldn't even hit the max. I couldn't really hit compression. So you could probably get higher output levels than what I'm showing here, but I just wanted to illustrate that. So let's keep, so this was at, so when I set the room to in the middle, it was at about 16.5 volume. So let's just keep the 14 because that's, I believe, the closest we can get here. So we'll keep the 14 with the room size set to small and remove all the others so that you can kind of see what happens with the room size set to small versus room size set to medium. So I like medium the best because it's a fairly flat response. You still have great output down to about 10 hertz. And you are sacrificing a little bit in the higher octaves. So you do have a little bit of a house curve, which is good. I like a house curve. Maybe not everybody does, but I do. And then you still have this more significant output down in the lower octaves. So the sweet spot for me, or what I prefer, is having the room size set to medium because you get a nice flat response with a little bit of a house curve. So I guess we don't really need to look at peaks for the room size set to medium, simply because I didn't do compression testing with it. I just wanted to set it there to show you guys kind of what it would look like relative to the room size set to small. And then here it is with the room size set to large. So again, this is -14 dB and this is -16 dB. So there's that difference there too. But there you have it, guys. There's the differences. I like the fact that they have this LF adjust right on the back of the subwoofer. You can quickly adjust your low end, take a measurement, and see what works best for you. But I hope this helps you guys in understanding the output of this subwoofer. Let's move on. So as you can see from those measurements, these subwoofers do have phenomenal output. There is no lack of output here. And I do like the fact that with the LF adjust, you can kind of adjust that low end to your liking without a whole lot of experience. You just turn the dial to see what you prefer. And if you do have REW and a calibrated microphone, you can always just measure. Earlier on in the video, I did say that JTR subwoofers are my favorite, and they truly are. And the reason being is I just haven't found a subwoofer that has the same heft, the same kick, the same... It's hard to explain. Once you've heard a JTR subwoofer, it just has this heaviness to the bass that is just basically perfect for a home theater. Now, I'm not saying that they don't work fantastic for music, because they do, but when dealing with home theater, you kind of want that immersion. You want that real feeling. Even for me personally, I even prefer if I do have a little bit of rattles in my room, because if there is a grenade or a bomb going off in a movie and you want that realism, well, guess what? If a bomb's going off in your house, things are going to shake. And I kind of like that. I know that a lot of you don't, but I kind of do. And these subwoofers are able to provide lots of shaking if you want them to, lots of rattles if you want them to, because they just have that authoritative, powerful bass that I believe a lot of people, or most people, are looking for when it comes to home theater bass. And the other part of it is that these subwoofers can provide such powerful bass in the lower octaves. Like in this case, you saw that they were pretty flat down to about 10 hertz. And of course, you can adjust that with the LF adjust. But in some cases and in some rooms, you're going to be flatter to say 7 or 8 hertz. I was with the RS2s flat to about 7 hertz in this room. So they have that really authority in the low octaves that I have had subwoofers in here before that measured flat to say, I think it was 8 or 9 hertz, but they didn't have nearly the same authority that the JTRs have. And that was with Power Sound Audio's TV3612s. They measured really well, but I just felt like they were lacking that authority. Like the measurement is there, but there was just no tactile. There was no feeling. There was no real rumble or heft to it. It was just there. It was measurable, but not really there at the same time. So it's hard to explain, but these subwoofers really fill in that gap that I'm trying to portray to you here. And I guess we're kind of already leaking into sound quality here, so we might as well talk about the sound quality. So I know that there's a lot of you out there that are going to be wondering how these subwoofers perform for music. So I'm going to give you my opinion in just a bit here, but I just want to kind of cover or preface this with audiophiles, so to speak. So they're going to be looking for the most articulate, accurate bass that they can find. And typically that is going to be provided from a servo subwoofer, something like Rhythmic. But from what I've read online, and I've talked to people that have Rhythmic, and I've talked to people that have had Rhythmic and JTR, where Rhythmic is sort of lacking is in that heft, that tactile response, that heaviness that JTR provides, which it just works so well for home theater. And it can work very well for music too, unless you're incredibly picky. Now, I am a bass head and I do like clean bass. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that these subwoofers have poor quality of any way, shape, or form, or they don't have the same quality of bass necessarily as Rhythmic, but it is a different sound signature. Some may say it might not be quite as accurate in a sense of the accuracy of the nuances of each tone. Maybe. I haven't heard a Rhythmic subwoofer. I have talked to people, like I said, that have them both. Now, I absolutely love them for music myself. So when I'm listening to music, they don't... A lot of you may be thinking, oh, it's a big 18-inch subwoofer. It's just going to be overpowering everything. No, that's up to you to tune your subwoofers in your room to what you want. But the thing is with these subwoofers is they are capable of that little bit heavier, hefty bass that still has a really good kick to it, a really sharp kick to it, but also the weight behind it. Not just a sharp boom, but a nice solid hit that's sharp, but also has some weight or some momentum behind it. That's what I like about these subwoofers. And for me, I want that in my music. I don't want just a light, so I don't want to use the word anemic because that's not really the right word, but I don't want that light bass, that light tapping kind of... It's hard to explain and it's really hard to put into words, but I want that heft. I want that weight behind it. And that's what JTR provides. That's the best way I can explain it to you guys. They do have low distortion. They have articulate bass, but they have a weight behind them that if you haven't experienced it, you won't know until you know. But it's fantastic, and I love it. Now, I know I've really been tooting the horn of JTR here, and it's all been extremely positive, and they deserve everything that I've said. Everything that I've said is 100% true, but nothing's perfect. So the only thing that I can really talk about that isn't necessarily a plus side of things, which, again, it depends on who you're talking to. For me, it's not a big deal, but it might be for some people, is they are a fair-sized subwoofer. So if you're going to be putting these in, say, like a living room setting where there's a lot of traffic, you have a lot of company there, and you really are concerned about looks, you are concerned about how things appear. They're, like I said, they're a utilitarian industrial design. They're not the prettiest of subwoofers. So if that is a concern, you could maybe talk to Jeff about getting a custom finish, or if that's not something that you want to look at doing, then you may want to look elsewhere for a subwoofer. But you would be doing yourself a disservice if you're looking for the best performance, the best output for a subwoofer in the price range. You'd be doing yourself a disservice not getting the JTR. Now, the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that is the size of these subwoofers. Now, for me, these are incredibly manageable. I've had some pretty monstrous subwoofers in this room before. Funk LFE 24, I'm looking at you. That thing was close to as tall as I am, significantly wider than what I have here, and significantly deeper than what I have here. It was just a monstrous subwoofer. Yeah, it had fantastic output, very similar to the Captivator 4000, give or take. You know, they're basically on par, give or take maybe a decibel and a half here and there, depending on which one you're talking about. But it was absolutely huge. It was so hard to place because something that size you can only put in certain spots where you have the room for it. So looking at these with that in mind, manageable size, not a big deal for me. But again, if you're putting them in a living space like a living room, and you have limited space, that's something to consider. But when it comes to like the JTR performance, the Captivator 4000 is much bigger. It's going to be much harder to place. So if that's too big for you, you might want to look at the Captivator 2400. Or if you want to go sealed, the RS1 is just a single 18-inch sealed subwoofer that is incredibly manageable. It's just basically a little cube. So you may want to look into that, but it is sealed. You wouldn't get the benefits of a ported design with that one. So I want to try and wrap this up into a nice, pretty package for you guys. I've been trying to do this review just really how I feel, like just digging deep to how I feel about these subwoofers and my true thoughts on them, and just trying to do my best to explain that to you guys, and so that you can understand what I'm dealing with these subwoofers, because it is hard to explain sound, so to speak. So I hope I did a good job of that. But to wrap it up in a nice, pretty package, if you are looking for a subwoofer that has really high output, especially and flat down to say 10 hertz or so, because these are tuned to 10 hertz, and still have phenomenal output in the higher octaves, that can still kick nice and hard, but it has a weight behind it, has heft behind it, and it just is able to do all those things. It's a fantastic all-arounder subwoofer. And again, if you're buying for home theater, I really wouldn't recommend anything other than JTR if you have the budget for it for home theater. My opinion, of course, but it's just a fantastic all-around subwoofer. The Captivator 4000, yes, you're going to get more output, but it is significantly larger and more difficult to place for me. If you have the room, then definitely look at that one. But the Captivator 2400, fantastic size, still has plenty of output, and it's just, like I said in the first impressions video, for me, it's a sweet spot. It really is a sweet spot for JTR. $3,500, phenomenal performance, low distortion, great sounding subwoofer that can just shake anything you want to shake, and it does it in, like I said, a manageable size. Fantastic subwoofer all around. That's really all I have to say about this Captivator 2400, guys.